The power of the powerless starts with honesty. Stop invoking rules-based international order as though it still functions as advertised. Call it what it is, a system of intensifying great power rivalry where the most powerful pursue their interests using economic integration as coercion. That was Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, speaking at World Economic Forum in Davos on January 20th, 2026. Standing ovation from global elite, unprecedented condemnation of American unpredictability, direct comparison naming China more reliable partner than United States. And Trump sitting in Washington realizing his leverage over Canada just evaporated completely. While Trump threatened annexation and military action, Carney announced strategic partnerships spanning 4 continents. While Trump assumed pressure would force compliance, Canada signed 12 trade deals in 6 months, bypassing American markets. While Trump weaponized economic integration, Carney built alternative architecture that eliminates United States intermediation permanently. The shock is absolute. Trump's coercion strategy collapsed in real time at Davos. Today, we are showing you exactly how Carney's Davos speech marks permanent rupture in North American relations, how Canada declared rules-based order dead, how middle powers created coalition excluding United States, how 1.5 billion person trading bloc emerges without American participation, how Trump's threats accelerated exact outcome Washington wanted to prevent, how Canada's diversification makes American pressure meaningless, and how this rupture becomes permanent fact reshaping global trade for generations. But before we dive in, if you appreciate deep analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to Canada Unfiltered for stories that truly matter. January 20th, 2026, World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland. Mark Carney delivered speech titled The Power of the Powerless. Title references Václav Havel's 1978 essay about communist Czechoslovakia. Havel described how systems sustain themselves through ordinary people's compliance. Shopkeeper displays sign, "Workers of the world unite," not because he believes it, but to avoid trouble. Everyone performs loyalty. System persists through collective pretense. Carney applied this framework to current international order, stated explicitly, for decades, countries like Canada prospered under rules-based international order. We joined institutions, praised principles, benefited from predictability, but we knew story was partially false. Strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, trade rules enforced asymmetrically, international law applied with varying rigor depending on identity of accused or victim. This fiction was useful, and American hegemony provided public goods. Open sea lanes, stable financial system, collective security, frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed sign in window, we participated in rituals, largely avoided calling out gaps between rhetoric and reality. But that bargain no longer works. Carney declared, "We are in midst of rupture, not transition." Over past 2 decades, series of crises in finance, health, energy, geopolitics laid bare risks of extreme global integration. More recently, great powers began using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes source of your subordination. The multilateral institutions on which middle powers relied, WTO, UN, COP, very architecture of collective problem solving are under threat. Translation, rules-based order is dead. Trump killed it. And Canada is building alternatives. Carney announced Canada's strategic response. First, recognize reality. Rules-based order does not function as advertised. Call it what it is, system of intensifying great power rivalry where most powerful pursue interests using economic integration as coercion. Second, act consistently. Apply same standards to allies and rivals. When middle powers criticize economic intimidation from one direction but stay silent when it comes from another, we are keeping sign in window. Third, build what we claim to believe in rather than waiting for old order to be restored. Create institutions and agreements that function as described. Fourth, reduce leverage that enables coercion. Building strong domestic economy is every government's immediate priority. Diversification internationally is not just economic prudence. It is material foundation for honest foreign policy because countries earn right to principled stands by reducing vulnerability to retaliation. Numbers prove transformation. Since Carney's government took office 6 months ago, Canada removed all federal barriers to interprovincial trade, cut taxes on incomes, capital gains, business investment, fast-tracking $1 trillion in infrastructure investments, energy, AI, critical minerals, new trade corridors, doubling defense spending by end of decade in ways that build domestic industries, and crucially, rapid diversification abroad. Canada agreed comprehensive strategic partnership with European Union, including joining PESCO, European Defense Procurement Arrangements. Signed 12 trade and security deals on 4 continents in 6 months. Past few days concluded new strategic partnerships with China and Qatar, negotiating free trade pacts with India, ASEAN, Thailand, Philippines, Mercosur. This is not incremental adjustment. This is wholesale abandonment of United States dependence. Carney's message on Trump was devastating. Stated relationship with China more predictable than relationship with United States. Let that sink in. Canadian Prime Minister publicly declaring communist authoritarian state provides more stable partnership than democratic ally based on experience. Trump's chaos versus Xi's consistency. American unpredictability versus Chinese reliability on agreements reached. Every Trump threat pushed Canada toward alternatives. Every tariff made diversification urgent. Every insult made partnership with China politically easier. Canadian public supports reducing United States dependence after Trump's behavior. Carney has political cover to pursue relationships that would have been controversial under different circumstances. Arctic sovereignty section was direct rebuke. Carney stated, "We stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future." Audience erupted in standing ovation. Then continued, "Our commitment to NATO Article 5 is unwavering. We're working with NATO allies, including Nordic Baltic 8, to further secure alliance's northern and western flanks. Canada's unprecedented investments in over-the-horizon radar, submarines, aircraft, boots on ground, boots on ice. Canada strongly opposes tariffs over Greenland and calls for focused talks to achieve shared objectives of security and prosperity in Arctic." Translation, Trump's Greenland threats are illegitimate. Canada sides with Denmark. Will defend NATO ally against American coercion. This is extraordinary. Canadian Prime Minister using international forum to condemn American president's territorial ambitions. Trade architecture announcement was most consequential. Carney revealed Canada championing efforts to build bridge between Trans-Pacific Partnership and European Union. Would create new trading bloc of 1.5 billion people without United States. CPTPP currently has 500 million people across 11 countries. EU has 450 million across 27 countries. Combined 950 million. But integration would expand to include associated markets reaching 1.5 billion consumers. Largest free trade zone in world history, completely bypassing United States. American exporters excluded, American services locked out, American influence eliminated, and Canada is architect. Carney positioning Canada as connector between Europe and Asia Pacific. Strategic role that marginalizes United States. On critical minerals, Carney announced buyers clubs anchored in G7. Purpose is diversify away from concentrated supply. Translation, reduce Chinese dominance, but also reduce any single country's leverage. Canada is major producer of lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths. Wants to coordinate with allies to prevent any supplier from weaponizing access. This applies to United States too. If Trump threatens to cut off critical mineral access, Buyers Club provides alternative sources. Canada is building resilience against American coercion specifically. AI cooperation framework excludes United States implicitly. Carney stated, "We're cooperating with like-minded democracies to ensure we won't ultimately be forced to choose between hegemons and hyperscalers." Hegemons means United States and China. Hyperscalers means tech giants, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, all American. Canada is building AI partnerships with Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia to avoid dependence on American platforms. Create alternative AI development that does not route through Silicon Valley. Reduces American technological leverage over allied economies. Energy announcements consolidated Asia-Pacific orientation. Carney confirmed Canada scaling LNG exports to 50 million tons annually by 2030, all for Asian markets. China is investor in first LNG project, will be investor in second LNG project, major user of conventional oil and gas. Translation, Canadian energy flows to Asia permanently. United States bypassed completely. Trans Mountain Pipeline operational. CPKC Railroad moving grain to Mexico. LNG terminals facing Pacific. Every major Canadian export infrastructure now oriented away from United States. Geographic reorientation is physical fact, cannot be reversed. Defense spending announcement was pointed. Canada doubling defense expenditure by end of decade, but doing so in ways that build domestic industries. Translation, not buying American weapons systems, developing Canadian defense industrial base, partnering with European manufacturers through PESCO, reducing dependence on American military equipment. Once Canada produces own systems, United States loses leverage from defense relationship. Cannot threaten to cut off weapons supplies or spare parts. Canada becomes strategically autonomous. Variable geometry concept was diplomatic revolution. Carney explained, we're pursuing variable geometry, different coalitions for different issues based on common values and interests. On Ukraine, Canada is core member of Coalition of the Willing, largest per capita contributor to defense and security. On Arctic sovereignty, stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark. On NATO, Article 5, commitment is unwavering. On plurilateral trade, championing Trans-Pacific Partnership and EU Bridge. On critical minerals, forming buyers' clubs anchored in G7. On AI, cooperating with like-minded democracies. Translation, Canada is building overlapping coalitions that exclude United States, where American participation is problematic. United States might be in Ukraine coalition, but excluded from trade architecture. Included in NATO, but sidelined on AI governance. Variable geometry lets Canada cooperate with Washington on some issues while bypassing Washington on others. Eliminates American veto over Canadian foreign policy. Carney's critique of transactionalism was devastating. Stated, if great powers abandon even pretense of rules and values for unhindered pursuit of their power and interests, gains from transactionalism will become harder to replicate. Hegemons cannot continually monetize their relationships. Allies will diversify to hedge against uncertainty. They'll buy insurance, increase options in order to rebuild sovereignty. Sovereignty that was once grounded in rules but will increasingly be anchored in ability to withstand pressure. This directly targets Trump's approach. Trump treats alliances as transactions, demands payment for protection, threatens to abandon commitments unless paid. Carney is saying this strategy backfires. Allies respond by reducing dependence, building alternatives, preparing for American abandonment, and once diversification happens, cannot easily reverse. Infrastructure creates facts on ground. Middle powers coalition was call to arms. Carney stated, I argue middle powers must act together because if we're not at table, we're on menu. But I'd also say great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have market size, military capacity, leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. When we only negotiate bilaterally with hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be most accommodating. This is not sovereignty, it's performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. In a world of great power rivalry, countries in between have choice. Compete with each other for favor or combine to create third path with impact. We shouldn't allow rise of hard power to blind us to fact that power of legitimacy, integrity, rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together. Translation, Canada is organizing middle powers against United States specifically, not against China or Russia exclusively, against any hegemon that tries to dictate terms, and middle powers acting together have substantial economic weight. Canada, EU, Japan, Korea, Australia, ASEAN, Mercosur, India, combined GDP exceeds $40 trillion, larger than United States. Combined population 2.5 billion, if coordinated, can resist American coercion, can build trade systems that bypass United States, can create security architectures that reduce American centrality. Carney is architect of this coalition, and Trump's threats are catalyst. Carney's closing was Declaration of Independence, stated Canada has what world wants. We are energy superpower, hold vast reserves of critical minerals, most educated population in world, pension funds among world's largest and most sophisticated investors, capital and talent, government with immense fiscal capacity to act decisively, and values to which many others aspire. Canada is pluralistic society that works, Public square is loud, diverse, free. Canadians remain committed to sustainability. We are stable and reliable partner in a world that is anything but. Partner that builds and values relationships for long term. And we have something else. Recognition of what's happening and determination to act accordingly. We understand this rupture calls for more than adaptation, calls for honesty about world as it is. We are taking sign out of window. We know old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not strategy, but we believe from fracture we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is task of middle powers, countries that have most to lose from world of fortresses and most to gain from genuine cooperation. Powerful have their power, but we have something too. Capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is path wide open to any country willing to take it with us. Message is clear. Canada is done with American dominance, building alternative architecture, organizing coalition of middle powers, creating trade systems, security partnerships, technology frameworks that function without American participation, and inviting entire world to join. Trump's response was silence. Cannot refute Carney's arguments, cannot offer alternative that matches what Canada is building, cannot threaten Canada without accelerating diversification. Leverage is gone. Standing ovation at Davos demonstrated global support. European leaders, Asian ministers, business executives, all applauding Canada's independence, all recognizing same dynamic in their own relationships with Washington, all considering how to replicate Canada's strategy. Trump isolated Canada successfully, isolated United States from Canada and from global consensus. Infrastructure makes this permanent. Canada signed 12 trade deals in 6 months. Each creates legal framework lasting decades. Each establishes institutional relationships that persist regardless of political changes. Trans-Pacific Partnership linked to EU requires years of negotiation to implement. Once operational, creates regulatory alignment, supply chain integration, investment flows that cannot easily reverse. PESCO participation embeds Canada in European defense industrial base. Joint development programs, shared procurement, interoperable systems, all creating permanent ties independent of United States. LNG export terminals facing Pacific lock in Asian energy trade for 30 to 40 years. Facilities built cannot be redirected, contracts signed cannot be broken. Chinese equity investment in Canadian projects creates shared interests that transcend political tensions. CPKC Railroad connects Canada and Mexico permanently, 32,000 kilometers of track. Single line service from Calgary to Mexico City, grain, manufactured goods, automotive parts, all flowing directly without touching United States infrastructure. American ports lose revenue. American inspection regime bypassed. American leverage eliminated. And railroad infrastructure lasts century or more. Rails laid in 1800s still in use. CPKC's network will serve North American trade until 2100, long after Trump, long after Carney, long after current governments. Physical reality that reshapes continental economics permanently. Buyers' clubs for critical minerals create coordinated purchasing. G7 countries plus partners negotiate collectively with suppliers. Prevents any single supplier from exercising monopoly pricing. Reduces Chinese market power, but also reduces Canadian or Australian leverage. Creates stable market where no participant can weaponize supply. Once established, buyers' clubs institutionalize, secretariats form, regular meetings scheduled, procurement coordinated, becomes permanent feature of global minerals trade. And United States is member only if accepts collective decision-making, cannot dominate, cannot dictate terms, must cooperate as equal or be excluded. AI governance frameworks being developed among like-minded democracies explicitly limit American tech giants' influence. Canada, EU, Japan, Korea, Australia, all concerned about dependence on Microsoft, Google, Amazon AI platforms. All developing regulatory frameworks requiring data sovereignty, algorithm transparency, local processing, all investing in domestic AI champions, all creating standards that American hyperscalers must follow to access markets. This fragments global AI ecosystem, prevents American companies from leveraging dominance in one market to control others, reduces technological dependence that Trump could weaponize, Trade bridge between CPTPP and EU creates regulatory alignment without American input. United States withdrew from TPP under Trump. Biden did not rejoin. Now Canada is connecting TPP with EU. Combined bloc will set product standards, labor rules, environmental requirements, digital trade frameworks. These become global norms through market size. 1.5 billion consumers demand compliance. Exporters worldwide must meet standards to access markets. American companies must comply with rules they had no role in writing. United States becomes rule taker, not rule maker. Loss of regulatory influence is loss of economic power. Defense industrial cooperation through PESCO reduces NATO dependence on American weapons. Canada, European allies developing joint systems, artillery, armored vehicles, missile defense, naval platforms, interoperable with NATO standards but not dependent on American technology. Once operational, creates alternative supplier relationships. If United States threatens to cut off F-35 parts or Patriot missiles, allies have European alternatives. Reduces American leverage over defense policy. Cannot coerce allies by threatening weapons cutoffs. Variable geometry coalition structure prevents American veto. Traditional alliance systems gave Washington central role. NATO, bilateral defense treaties, hub and spoke model in Asia. All routes through United States, all subject to American approval. Variable geometry replaces this with overlapping coalitions. Canada works with EU on trade, with Nordic countries on Arctic, with ASEAN on Asia-Pacific engagement, with Mercosur on Latin America, with Australia on critical minerals. Each coalition includes some American allies, but not United States itself. No single node, no central hub. Distributed network resistant to disruption. If United States pressures Canada, Canada has partners in multiple coalitions who will support Canadian position. Washington cannot isolate Ottawa without isolating itself. Carney's emphasis on predictability was devastating critique. Stated relationship with China more predictable than relationship with United States. Based on concrete experience. Agreement with China on visa-free travel implemented immediately, tariff reductions on canola delivered on schedule, investment commitments in LNG followed through. Meanwhile, agreements with United States subject to Trump's whims. USMCA renegotiated, then threatened again, then modified through side letters, then ignored through unilateral tariffs. Rules change weekly. Partners cannot plan long-term, cannot make investment decisions, cannot structure supply chains. Chaos makes United States unreliable. China's authoritarian predictability becomes advantage. Agreements reached with Xi Jinping will be honored regardless of political changes because system ensures continuity. Irony is profound. Democratic United States less reliable than communist China because democracy produced Trump while authoritarianism produces stability. This undermines American soft power catastrophically. For 75 years, United States claimed moral authority from democratic values, rule of law, respect for agreements, positioned itself as trustworthy partner, contrasted with Soviet and Chinese treaty violations. Now, Canadian Prime Minister declaring openly China is more predictable partner based on evidence, observed behavior, actual outcomes. If Canada, closest ally, makes this assessment, what are other countries concluding? Japan, Korea, Philippines watching United States abandon commitments. Taiwan wondering if defense guarantee is reliable. European allies questioning NATO after Greenland threats. Middle East partners seeing transactional approach to security, all asking same question. Can we trust Washington? And increasingly answering no, building alternatives accordingly. Soft power collapse accelerates hard power decline. Carney's Davos speech formalized what was already happening. Canada's pivot away from United States began when Carney took office, but Davos speech made it official policy, declared rules-based order dead, announced middle powers coalition, revealed specific partnerships replacing American relationships, stated explicitly China more reliable than United States, invited entire world to join Canada's path. This is unprecedented. Canadian Prime Minister using global platform to organize coalition against American hegemony, not covertly, openly, proudly, to standing ovation. And Trump cannot respond effectively, cannot threaten tariffs because Canada already diversifying markets. Chinese market absorbs canola. Mexican market takes grain. European market buys critical minerals. Asian market receives LNG. Lost leverage over trade. Cannot threaten military action because NATO allies side with Canada. Greenland's statement proved this. Denmark is NATO member. Canada is NATO member. Trump threatening Greenland means threatening NATO allies. Article 5 requires collective defense. If Trump attacked Greenland, Canada would defend Denmark. So would all NATO members. Trump cannot use military coercion without destroying alliance. Lost leverage over security, cannot threaten technology cutoffs because Canada developing alternatives, partnering with European defense manufacturers, investing in domestic AI, joining EU technology initiatives, building capabilities independent of American platforms. Once developed, cannot coerce through denial of access, lost leverage over technology. Every source of traditional American leverage over Canada is being systematically eliminated. Trade, security, technology, finance, all diversified, all developing alternatives, all reducing dependence, and infrastructure investments make this irreversible. Built systems last generations, relationships established persist, legal frameworks endure. Trump's pressure accelerated process he wanted to prevent. Each threat pushed Canada toward alternatives. Each tariff made diversification urgent. Each insult made new partnerships politically acceptable. Canadian public supports reducing United States dependence. Polls show 70% of Canadians view Trump as threat. 65% support deeper engagement with Asia and Europe. 60% approve China partnership specifically. Carney has Democratic mandate for everything he announced at Davos. Permanent nature of rupture cannot be overstated. Carney stated explicitly, old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. This is not temporary adjustment waiting for Trump to leave office. This is recognition that American-led order is finished. Trump is symptom, not cause. American society produced Trump can produce another Trump or someone worse. System that creates such instability cannot be foundation for allied security or prosperity. So Canada is building new foundation with partners who share interests under frameworks that function predictably, in coalitions that don't depend on American approval. Infrastructure investments totaling over $1 trillion create this new foundation. LNG export terminals, Trans Mountain Pipeline, CPKC Railroad, Arctic Defense Systems, PESCO participation, AI development partnerships, critical minerals extraction, all oriented away from United States, all creating permanent facts, all reshaping Canadian economy for generations. Once built, cannot reverse. Once operational, becomes normal. Once integrated into supply chains, becomes essential. Future Canadian governments inherit this infrastructure, must maintain relationships that support it, cannot abandon partnerships that enable it, becomes structural feature of Canadian economy independent of political changes. For Trump, Davos speech represents total strategic failure. Intended to force Canadian submission through pressure, actually triggered Canadian independence through diversification. Intended to demonstrate American power, actually demonstrated American weakness. Allies can defy Washington, build alternatives, organize coalitions, and succeed. Trump's threats proved empty, cannot enforce compliance, cannot prevent diversification, cannot maintain dominance through coercion. Other countries watching, drawing conclusions. If Canada can successfully resist American pressure, we can too. If Canada can build alternatives, we can too. If Canada can organize coalitions, we can too. Demonstration effect is catastrophic for American hegemony, and reversal becomes harder. Infrastructure built cannot be unbuilt. Relationships established cannot be unestablished. Coalitions formed cannot be unformed. Legal frameworks created cannot be uncreated. Path dependency sets in. New normal becomes normal. That is permanent legacy, not Trump's intended consequence. Trump wanted submission, got independence, wanted dominance, got irrelevance, wanted leverage, got bypass, and Carney's Davos speech formalized what Trump's pressure created, documented for history, explained to global audience, invited world to participate, standing ovation confirmed acceptance. Middle powers are done with great power subordination, building alternative architecture, creating new international order. Where legitimacy matters, where agreements are honored, where coercion fails, where middle powers acting together have power to shape their own futures. And Trump, sitting in Washington, watching video of Carney's speech, finally understanding what his threats accomplished. Not Canadian surrender, Canadian liberation, not American triumph, American decline, not leverage restored, leverage eliminated permanently. The shock is complete and irreversible. If you want to stay updated on how Canada is reshaping global power, make sure to subscribe to Canada Unfiltered. This is just the beginning.